Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're jumping straight into a terrifying, hidden architecture that basically surrounds us every single day. We are diving deep into this intense, really high-stakes intersection of digital identity, the voyeuristic gaze, and, of all things, theoretical temporal physics. Now, I know that sounds like a crazy mix of sci-fi and cyberpunk, but the wildest part? This is the exact reality of the modern internet. So let's just get right into it.
I want you to think about the screens you stare into every day. We tend to treat our phones and computers as these incredibly safe spaces, right? Like blank canvases where we just casually paint our lives. But what if that safety is a complete illusion? When you look into that black mirror, it's not just passively reflecting you, it is actively constructing a version of you. It's fragmenting your identity into these endless streams of data, completely shattering the boundary between who you actually are and who you portray online. And that realization brings us to a really haunting, almost hypnotic question that sits right at the core of our whole digital existence. Who is actually watching the avatar you build? Think about it. We meticulously curate our photos, our status updates, our friend lists, but we rarely, if ever, stop to ask whose gaze we are actually performing for. And more importantly, how does that unseen audience fundamentally alter the reality of the person we're pretending to be? Section 1. The digital bricolage. To really understand this, we need to look at how we build our foundation online. Sociologists Chandler and Roberts-Young use a term for how we construct our digital selves. They call it bricolage. It sounds fancy, but bricolage is basically just the ongoing assembly, disassembly, and reassembly of seemingly totally random elements. You know, your photos, your Spotify playlists, your friend groups. Researchers studying teenagers found that young people engage in this continuous, hyper-personalized curation just to maintain the illusion of an authentic self. They are constantly tweaking the digital code of their identity. They delete a photo here, they change a top friend there, desperately trying to map their static, physical identity onto this fluid, ever-changing digital representation. But here's the catch. If your self is just a collage of digital fragments, it becomes incredibly vulnerable to whoever is consuming it. Section 2. The voyeuristic male gaze. Which brings us right into the shadows. Because to understand the watcher, we have to look back at cinematic and cultural history, where the dominant lens for consuming media is overwhelmingly patriarchal. Back in 1975, a critic named Laura Mulvey coined this groundbreaking concept called the male gaze. She pointed out the distinct to-be-looked-atness of women in cinema. Basically, the camera, and by extension, us, the audience, is positioned to view the female form as a passive object of visual pleasure. She called this scopophilia. The woman on screen is subjugated, she's stripped of her agency, and turned into a mere signifier for male fantasies. And this power dynamic, it doesn't just stay in a dark movie theater. It is literally the exact same underlying surveillance architecture that watches our digital avatars today. And this visual subjugation has a seriously chilling history, especially when you look at the horror and thriller genres. When asked about his creative philosophy, legendary director Alfred Hitchcock famously declared, "Torture the women." That exposes a deeply unsettling truth about scary cinema. It evokes visual pleasure from the objectification, the victimization, and the physical violation of women. The surveillance becomes romanticized. The audience actually becomes complicit in the stalking. So the absolutely crucial point here is how different creators handle this voyeuristic terror. Take Hitchcock's classic Vertigo. The camera aligns perfectly with the male protagonist, Scotty. When he stalks Madeline, the film uses subjective angles, warm colors, this sweeping romantic score. We are totally lulled into feeling that his obsessive surveillance is lovely, maybe even tragic. But then contrast that with Satoshi Kon's 1997 anime masterpiece, Perfect Blue. Kon takes that exact same voyeuristic machinery and totally flips it, pointing a critical, repulsive lens right back at the viewer. Section 3. Perfect Blue's true terror. Let's delve a bit deeper into how Perfect Blue completely shatters the safety of the screen. It creates this sense of cosmic dread that perfectly and terrifyingly mirrors our modern digital lives. The film follows Mima, a pop idol transitioning into acting who is hunted by a stalker and her own digital, ghostly doppelganger. Unlike Vertigo, Perfect Blue frames Mima with these imposing, high camera angles that strip her of all her power. The colors are muted, shadowy, almost oppressive, and the violence she experiences is visceral and totally unromanticized. The film brilliantly muddles her public performance with her private life, creating this inescapable agony.
And honestly, what makes Perfect Blue more relevant today than it ever was is its acute understanding of parasocial relationships. Mima's terrifying loss of identity to an obsessive internet presence is the exact psychological terror anyone faces when their digital avatar takes on a life of its own.
Section 4. The bootstrap paradox. Okay, but what happens when that digital avatar completely detaches from your physical self? To understand the ultimate psychological breakdown of the victim here, we actually have to borrow a concept from the quantum physics of temporal paradoxes. Think about a causal loop, which is also known as a bootstrap paradox. This occurs when an event or a piece of information ultimately causes itself. Imagine a billiard ball on a table that is suddenly struck by its future self, perfectly altering its trajectory in the past to ensure it eventually goes back in time to strike itself. The change in trajectory literally caused itself. It is a loop of information entirely bootstrapping its own existence, with absolutely no true point of origin. Section 5. Entangled timelines of reality. Now, you might be thinking, okay, but these loops don't just happen in isolation, right? Exactly. Our fractured digital identities infect the rest of reality in the exact same way these loops infect a timeline. Let's compare how this spreads. In theoretical physics, the classic many-worlds interpretation suggests the entire physical universe branches out to accommodate different timelines. But recent research proposes a totally different concept called entangled timelines. In this model, timelines don't split the whole universe. They emerge as separate entities via local interactions within a single space-time. They spread locally, almost like a virus, as more systems become entangled. Think about a viral trend on TikTok or a massive cycle of online surveillance. It doesn't instantly change the whole world in 1 second. It infects local interactions, system by system, spreading a corrupted version of reality until the loop just consumes everything it touches. Visually, imagine this as this massive, inescapable architecture. Picture monolithic corporate data towers blocking out the sky, wrapping our entire society in closed causal curves. It's a very dark cyberchem reality. The social media platforms we use, they are essentially the time machines. They take the digital information of who you used to be, they loop it through their algorithmic surveillance, and then they feed it right back to you in the present, which fundamentally alters your future behavior. You become trapped in a self-fulfilling loop dictated by a digital architecture that was explicitly designed to watch you. Section 6. The infinite loop. And this brings our cinematic and physical thesis to its haunting, inevitable conclusion. Back in 1992, physicists who were exploring the Novikov self-consistency principle actually labeled items trapped in these originless loops as djinn. A djinni of the second kind is basically a piece of information making a circular passage through time. It comes from nowhere, it has no creator. Now map this concept back to Mima in Perfect Blue, or even just a modern teenager assembling their identity through digital bricolage. If your online avatar is constantly shifting based on the voyeuristic gaze of the algorithm in the audience, and that avatar in turn dictates how you behave in the real world, well, your identity becomes a djinni. It is a fractured, artificially constructed self looping infinitely with no original soul left. Which leaves us with this final, chilling thought to take away from this explainer today. As the boundary between your physical self and your digital ghost dissolves entirely, and the screens all around us reflect only the fragmented data we fed them to appease an unseen watcher, if your digital avatar is trapped in an infinite loop of surveillance with no original self, who is actually looking back at you in the mirror?